Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
David, good morning to you. Welcome back to the show and thank you again for your time.
That's all right. My pleasure.
No, the theme that I wanted to talk about was just talking to younger people these days. When I say young, in their teens and 20s, and the disconnect that they love the footy, they love their team, they love watching the footy and all the media that goes with it, but the disconnect that they have with the past, the history of the game, I find really foreign, because for me, and I'm sure for yourself back in the 1950s as a young man, although you barracked for Melbourne, I presume you would have been well aware of all the other stars of the other clubs and the history of the game and the deep entrenched history. Was that how it was for you back then, like it was for me?
That's an interesting question, Rob. I think my interest initially as a 7-year-old, I started to go regularly to football. Melbourne Football Club was my love at that particular time. My connection through Ian Ridley, who went on to become captain and coach and president of that particular club, happened to be my dad's clerk in the State Savings Bank, as it was in those days. So I got to know a player, a person. That connection became very powerful, remained for the rest of his days. So the history that came before, Rob, I'd have to say I wasn't all that interested. I don't think I took a real concern. I mean, the history that has developed in my 50 or 60, whatever it is now, it was a long time, 60 years association with the game, that particular history I have an absolute fascination with, but my children not interested in the period of time that I played, certainly interested in the time that I coached. Yeah, I mean, people look at history in different ways and connect with the game in different ways. It's a good question. I think the knowledge of the great players of pre-war and that pre-Second World War were probably super times for the game in a real sense, because of the special people that you'll be able to recall who contributed both in a playing and a coaching sphere. Yeah, look, Australian history, and there's a fair bit been written. I've got more books on the shelves here of about Australian football history, particularly during my lifetime, and it's a fascinating study, because it's really, stepped along in the social context of the day. When you look at what's happening, Rob, at the moment, in the manner which the game is played, I'd have to say I can't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to enjoy, because it's in fact a different game. The game that I played and loved and watched as a kid is so far removed from the game that the young people today watch and love. It's just a different game.
Yeah, and I suppose they love it for different reasons, and then 20 years now they'll be talking about their good old days.
Yes.
I don't mean to embarrass you, I have said this before, but this also came to light last year when you were kind enough to come up to the Winchelsea Football Club and speak to a playing group, and I was stunned by the fact that a large percentage of that group that I spoke to had never heard of you, and here is, you've had an ongoing 60-year contribution to the game, and I was staggered by that there could be such a disconnect from our game's history that an AFL legend was unknown to a modern day footy nut. But that's just the way it goes.
The frightening thing was they knew who Rob Cameron was.
No, but that's interesting. But even yesterday I was trying to do an NBN connection, etc., with a young bloke who loves the game and had no idea at all. He's a boy, and I had a good talk to him. He's a boy in his early 20s, doing a terrific job. He was so knowledgeable, and his communication was excellent, and loved the game as a passionate Collingwood supporter as he is now. Had no idea when I said who my name was and what I'd been associated with the game. You go, oh, yeah, isn't that right? Oh, golly, that's interesting, So you pass very, very quickly. Even my grandkids have got no idea either, and their interest in football stems from their connection with the game now, not my connection from the past.
Yeah, and oddly, there's so much more avenue to connect to the history with,
Yes.
with internet and newspaper articles and as you said, so many books that are available. When you were a youngster, I guess it was just the Herald Sun and the Sporting Globe that you started to read to get what was happening in the other footy camps?
A bit in the truth.
Oh, yeah?
Which
That you only bought for the football articles, of course.
A contradiction by name and nature. Yeah, look, that's true, isn't it? And the stuff that was written by the great writers, even Alf Brown at the time, I can remember Alf Brown. No, John Kennedy ringing me and say, Alf Brown will want to ring you on a Friday morning to do his article as a lead into the weekend's football. He said, I'd like you to cooperate with him. This is the great John Kennedy, who we just lost. And I said, oh, okay. On that basis, we had a very open and honest relationship with Alf, and Alf wrote the most detailed information, as I would thought, leading to the games in those days for those who were interested. And he was working off the back of a direct relationship with the coaches of the day. So he was giving insights and understandings without our names being used that people, I think, probably enjoyed. So there's been some, I mean, I look in the book, in the shelf, I just got the Red Foxes looking at me now on the shelf in front of me. And when you think of the context in which this book was written about the life of Norm Smith and the period of time and the change in the game and the incredible record of him as a coach and the Melbourne Football Club at that particular time, this book is seriously about 3 inches thick, and it's a great read because it's almost, Rob, at the same time, a social history of the time that we were living.
Yeah,
I think being able to combine Australian football with what was happening in the world at that time is a fascinating study in itself.
So, David, it's Neil Butler here. And as has been well documented in the past, I'm a Fitzroy supporter. I'd like to go back to the 60s. That's when I was growing up. You were a Hawthorn footballer. And on very, very rare occasions, twice a year, Fitzroy might find its way onto the replay. Otherwise, it was all Collingwood, Carlton, Richmond, Essendon. And so the personalities of the game, we're thinking of the Bob Skiltons, the Ron Barassis, the Kevin Murrays, the Teddy Whittons, these sort of guys, were there, but I would have thought nothing like what they are now with the saturation. There's a bloke apparently plays for Richmond called Jack Rewalt that occasionally pops up on TV. Sorry, the man with no surname, Jack. I'm fascinated to know how, as the captain of the Hawthorn Football Club, what the media impact was on, apart from obviously chatting to Elf on a Friday morning. Well, that was more as a coach, but how was the requirement on you to be, if you like, the face of footy at that time?
Very little or none. And because I grew up, I suppose, and was influenced by the great John Kennedy himself, who gave absolutely no time. I must have been the worst, and I've written letters to apologise to the journalists who I ridiculed and was non-cooperative with because I hated the fifth quarter. I was the person who coined the phrase the fifth quarter, which was me having to go and meet the press after a game. And when I think of my non-cooperation or assistance to them, it was a disgrace. I would be sacked not because of my ability to coach or not, but by inability to represent the club and provide them with the media response that was necessary to get people on board. So in that sense, the game, when we think about it, every element of the game has been turned upside down and changed and developed. And more than anything else, as you're suggesting, the media input, the media access, the various kinds of media outlets that are involved in footy, it's almost the most important aspect of the game is the media. The media probably more than the organisers or the managers of the game, etc. The media probably plays, I would think, I mean, I can be argued against here, but probably play the most important as well, the most significant role in Australian football right now is the media's ability and all the modes of that media to, communicate what's happening and not happening in the game. And it's totally different. The game, I mean, as a player now, your performance is so, what's the word we're looking for?
Scrutinised.
That's the perfect word. Is so scrutinised. The fun of, and I've talked to players, I think I might have talked to Rob before about this. I sat with the three fat, slow insiders at the Hawthorn Football Club who remain nameless, but only just 2 or 3 years ago. One's back there coaching and the other two are in other clubs doing other things. But they, over a lunch, told me how much the joy, the actual playing of the game, had been reduced for them because we're talking about the 90-plus stoppages which the game has these days in terms of ball-ups and throw-ins, and at those stoppages how either the coach himself or the stoppage coach or the offensive coach or the defensive coach or the midfield coach has actually told them what their starting position is and what their role, what their action is from that starting point. Now, surely, when we think about it, that would take away the absolute joy of playing the game. When I went out, we chased the ball, got it from whatever starting point we thought was best, not somebody else had told us. We made a decision whether to kick or hand pass. In my position, I only kicked the ball. Didn't have a hand pass in those days in the back pocket. And to whom we would do that. And, it all came from within. But they're now having that pre-planned, pre-prescribed, and they were saying how much the fun being chase the ball, get it, make a decision and execute that decision is what kids do when they're playing the game, how much that had been reduced by the influence of coach and direction.
So all that natural instinct to play and love the game is sadly taken away.
And I think the other thing that I guess I point the finger at the media, and theoretically all three of us are part of that, so we all look a bit guilty at the same time. But this morning in a let's call it the Herald Sun for the purpose of the exercise, there was the following heading in the newspaper: Jacinta furious over buddy separation. Now, this is because apparently Mr. Franklin is spending 8 weeks away from home in a COVID quarantine hub, and his wife is a bit distressed about that. Have we got to the stage now where the media is so desperate for stuff to put in the newspapers that a conversation about someone having to spend 8 weeks away from home becomes more important than the tactical activities associated with winning a game of footy?
Yeah, look, and that's a very good statement. But the circumstances that we happen to be in right now, as a country, probably certainly in my lifetime we've never faced before. I'm not sure how long, and so it's a time where I guess exposure of people under the kind of pressure we're under is happening in a way that most of us will look back on and be a bit sad about, a bit embarrassed about in some cases, but it's a hungry media looking for every aspect of life at the moment, and because football, and I think other people might think there are more important things, and there probably are, but I think that we've been fortunate, I might get myself in trouble, we've been fortunate that Australian football continues at a time when we're all, I've been in isolation now for 6 months or 5 or 6 months, and not enjoying that too much. One of my great outlets is to watch, listen, talk about Australian football, which is still fundamental to the joy or the fun or the life or the enjoyment of so many people, old, young, male, female. And for it to be continued in the manner which it is, I'm not sure how long it's going to stay alive. Somebody will do something stupid, and I guess the game will maybe be locked down again, which will be sad. But at the moment, it's one of the few things that we look forward to. I'm watching every game avidly. It's one of the joys of my current existence, which is there ain't much joy in.
Well, as is evidenced by you have to ring us on a Saturday morning for entertainment. But the fact that we know who Jacinta Franklin and Brooke Cochin and others are, Could you just run me through the wives' names of Bob Skilton, Teddy Whitten, Noel Teasdale, and the fact that we just have Jacinta and Buddy? We don't even need their surname to know who they are. It's seemingly all about personalities.
Yeah, no, I think you've got it right there. No, I think I would have remembered their names, but they often change their wives often. So
there is that, I suppose. Yeah,
we didn't have a great record with it, me included. So no, look, it is funny. Yeah, but you're right. But we can name the 8 or 9 or 10 people that came out of that period of time in Australian football who were out and out champions of the game, who did impact on our lives. And I played directly against Bob Skilton, and he was my most difficult opponent of all time, and indelibly etched, if you like, in my memory. He still is, and still alive and hanging on, I think, pretty well at the moment. They were the few. Now I think we've got a broader set of personalities, if you like to call them, which are distributed a little more widely in the community related to people than we probably did in those days. They were much more, I think, limited teams, limited players in those teams, that the football public as a whole, not just those who happened to follow that team, actually took a real interest in and a joy in watching them play, no doubt.
David, you talked about the fifth quarter, and I didn't realise you had such a dislike for it, because I thought you probably handled it relatively well, particularly the other one on World of Sport on Sundays. They were obviously quite entertaining. But when you sat there in front of the microphone and there's this wall of people in front of you, were there particular ones that you cringed at the sight of because you knew they were going to ask something stupid, or on the other side, were there people that always asked a question that challenged your thought process and you actually enjoyed? Because I imagine there'd be a vast difference between the two.
Yeah, well, I think I was so antagonistic, I was so negative in terms of going to the aftermatch. I thought it was an imposition rather than, as we would be, I think, compelled to do if we were an AFL coach today, was to ensure that we were projecting the image of, the coach's image, but the image of our club and the kind of public view that we would want, and the coach is obviously the outward and visible sign. I mean, they carry a terrible pressure, I would have thought, currently doing the media, like during the game at quarter time and half time, having to meet the press. I would have been good at that.
Yeah. As Kath Lachlan walks over and says, "So, David, you're down by 7 goals. How's your day going?"
It's triple, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, you know what? The questions that they've got to ask are inane, and the answers they've got to give are nippers. We don't tell anything anyway. Yet we still go through that process, player and coach, or coach and media person. Media person hates being there and asking it now, and the person on the end of it doesn't want to be there and answer. So it's not I get embarrassed by it. I'd rather turn the television down rather than listen to what I know. I can predict what they're going to say, and anyway.
It is very cringeworthy.
I've written my biography only for the family, etc., and it's been fascinating to me. I've got some letters I wrote and received is one of the chapters in it. So I've kept some of these. Andy Marr, the current Andy Marr, and Andy Marr's a Carlton man. We had a massive run in, and I got stuck into him. I wrote him a letter because I was a letter writer. Wrote him a letter absolutely condemning him, which I put in the book, and then his response to my letter. It's quite fascinating insight back in those days. And Andy and I have become really close mates, on the back of what was a dreadful beginning and a dislike. He intensely disliked me, and I was probably similar to him, to have that somersault into now a really good ongoing friendship, which we share lots.
And before we let you go, because we probably should go and let you go and have the rest of your Saturday morning, my understanding is you're very, very pleased on how the holding the ball rule's going at the moment. He said, throwing a hand grenade.
Look, you comment. I mean, and I know a couple of the umpires who, and it's being directed and they're being pressurised. I think any rule any interpretation of the rule which takes the joy out of what we come to see is that people want to watch the players playing the game. See, let's go with the honest that we can laugh about that, and it's a difficult rule to adjudicate. But no doubt in my mind that every opportunity must be given to a bloke who's making the play.
Yep.
I would somehow adjudicate and rule out there are 2 or 3 players in every team now who are going out just to stop others from playing.
Yep.
That's their major focus.
Yep.
Front them on, don't even look at the ball, put their arms out so that the person can't get to the ball. I would free kick and penalise them so hard and so often that the coaches couldn't afford to pick them.
Yep.
And certainly couldn't afford to coach them to play that way. I want to watch the ball players play. I want to give them the time and the space to get the ball and do something with it. I don't want to see lunatics running around who are great athletes who can concentrate hard and prevent other people from playing the game. Who wants to see that? Who, in any shape or form, wants to see that? Certainly not me. So I hope that we change our philosophy relative to the bloke who's trying to play the game.
Yeah, the funny part about it, David, I was very frustrated. It was probably this time last year. I was thinking, have they removed pushing the back from the rule book? So I went and I acquired an AFL rule book, an Australian rules football rule book, and I read it, and it is still a very simply written, sensible set of rules that you'd think of from the outside wouldn't be that difficult to adjudicate on. But it seems that the umpiring coaches or the umpires themselves have put this incredible complication to it, and I don't know whether it's from direction for the form of entertainment, but you're quite right about the people being held at stoppages. There's a rule in the book to say don't do that, just adjudicate it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think she's the most difficult game in the world to play, the most difficult game in the world probably to coach, but there is no argument it is the most difficult game in the world to umpire. And it's incredibly difficult task for them on a weekly basis, and if we keep changing the interpretation and doing it, I don't know how I tips my lid to them really. I think it's tough, and we should be supporting them all. But who's an Australian who does support the umpire? That's just
the other umpires.
And of course, the other thing that happens is with the end-of-back rule, for example, every now and again one will be paid, and it's there every day of the week. But the 17 that they haven't paid, immediately everyone goes, "Oh."
I'm with you. Why would you play in front?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to be removed from the contest, whether it's a ground or area. We're going to remove from the contest illegally. So why would you get there? You're going to run second. You're going to get rewarded by running second.
Run second and tackle. David, thanks for your time again. Really, I'm quite humbled by how giving you are of your time. And it's great to have you back. We probably will annoy you if you're still locked down in 6 weeks, as I get the impression you're probably happy to have a bit of a chat about the game anyway.
Yeah, it's the only conversation I've had with anybody for 3 weeks.
And that was the last time you talked to us.
Good on you, mate.
Probably right.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. All the very
Thanks
best.
for having us. Right.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.